It's time for the TechMobility Show with Ken Chester. Ken is a veteran journalist who doesn't always color between the lines. So, here he is, the host with the electrified personality, Ken Chester.
Real facts, real opinions, real talk. Time once again for the TechMobility Show, your program for news, information, and perspective at the intersection of mobility and technology. I'm Ken Chester, and a full docket awaits, so let's get started. On the docket, partial automation systems are unlikely to prevent crashes. America is running out of generic drug makers, and about the 2 Boeing Starliner astronauts that are stuck in space. To add your voice to the conversation, be it to ask a question, share an opinion, or even suggest a topic for future discussion, call or text the TechMobility Hotline. That number, 872-222-9793, or you can email the show directly, talk@techmobility.show. And that's talk@techmobility.show. Be sure to check us out on the social media or wherever you enjoy podcasts. We are on all major platforms. Heck, we even have a YouTube channel, so you want to check that out. From the Tech Mobility News Desk, and before I get into talking about one particular topic that I picked for today to share with you, I want to talk about I recently had the opportunity to be interviewed by Hiawatha Gray of the Boston Globe relative to why there are not more black EV owners. And his premise was that folks of color were evaluating EVs, but when they got down to making the decision, decided against going that far. I contended in my conversations with the reporter that for most folks, and particularly people of color, the conversation wasn't even getting that far. Now, those of you who are listening to the program over this past year, you know about my trip back in January to Chicago in an EV and the trials and tribulations I had, which for me, I thought that my next vehicle would be an EV, but why I was not going to go there. A lot of people don't get that far. You say electric vehicle, and that's as far as they go. They haven't thought about it. They haven't researched it. They haven't taken the steps like they would normally for a regular vehicle to evaluate to see if it's even an option. I say that's really too bad, and here's why. For all the pluses and minuses, and there are both, about electric vehicles, I believe, in my research and my knowledge for over the last 7 years or so, that the pluses outweigh the minuses. Now, the big minuses still are a lack of consistent public charging facilities, pretty much as many as there are gas stations, and that's still an issue. As a result, range is an issue, particularly in extreme weather, either extreme heat or extreme cold. And then there's the price. I'm actually buying an EV. Those are real. Those are real drawbacks. Let me handle them a bit at a time. Recent legislation passed in the last 2 years has put billions of dollars on the table to build out a public EV network. There are also many more billions being pledged by a host of private companies that are working to do just that. Site acquisition, connection to the network, ordering the infrastructure necessary to build these take time. And I honestly believe that while we are not where I think America needs to be for widespread EV adoption relative to a public charging facility network, I think that the combination of Tesla opening up their network to anybody, and that's over the next couple of years, and as these other projects come online and begin to get connected to the grid, it will be less of an issue. Also, there is, and I've reported about that here, a group of companies attempting to tackle what I think is the last great frontier for EV ownership. And that's folks like me, apartment dwellers, who may not necessarily live near a public charging facility, that don't own or have access to a personal garage where I can plug in my EV in my garage and have it trickle charge on a level 2 charger overnight. There's a host of us that we consider an EV, but because of where we live, it's just not it's not the opportunity we get to have. There are an increasing number of new apartment buildings that are considering EVs and have put aside a few stalls for EV charging, but that presents its own problems, particularly if people in that building decide to go overwhelming for EVs. There's not enough spaces to charge all the vehicles all the time. And then what do you do about somebody who comes in, plugs it in, and 6 hours later in the middle of the night, it's charged and other people want to use it, but it's 3 a.m. They're not getting up to come outside to move their vehicle and unplug the charger. So there's housekeeping things like that. Signs of this changing. I shared with you months ago and told you that the vanguard of pure EVs, that when domestic automakers get into scaling up all their EV projects, that you would see battery chemistries change, price of them come down as they move to more common materials like iron and coal and other commonly available materials which don't require rare earths, and that they figure out a way to get around them being less dense energy-wise, like the typical lithium iron or nickel manganese batteries, which are the gold standard in terms of energy density. The current other cheaper battery currently in use is a lithium iron phosphate battery. It's 25% cheaper than the standard lithium ion, but it's not as energy dense. And companies are taking different approaches to bringing these batteries into their development system, into their production system, into their engineering for electric cars. And I think what you're going to see is a combination of different battery chemistries in the same vehicle. Perhaps lithium iron phosphate for short trips and quick recharging, the nickel manganese batteries for longer trips and, better energy density for range. And that's happening now too. The recent introduction of the Chevy Equinox EV, I told you that would be the game changer. And honestly, GM has followed the path of every major new thing that comes into the industry. From Super Cruise to StabiliTrak to all of this takes 20 years, and they usually start in their most expensive low volume vehicles and then scale up over time. The Ultium battery and the Ultium battery platform is no different. GM started on the expensive side because they got to recoup these expenses. They are building a brand new infrastructure that has nothing in common with the infrastructure they've been running for over 100 years relative to building internal combustion engines, transmissions, and all the suspension, braking, and component parts that go with that type of engineering. They're engineering a product line that has that is heavily electronic, that has a battery management system, which is all computerized, all software, and a motor that has 18 parts in it. 18. The internal combustion engine in your vehicle right now has hundreds of parts, a bunch of dangerous chemicals, heavy metals, and all kinds of toxic stuff that is toxic to you, toxic to the land, toxic to the environment. EVs don't have that. And to those of you that say, yeah, but you got to consider the whole chain of how EVs are built, and if you take that into consideration, EVs are dirty or bad for the planet. BMW, Volvo, every single automaker currently making the switch to build EVs are digging deep into their supply chains to make them sustainable. It is not just at the final assembly. They're going all the way back from green energy, green hydrogen, green steel, green cement, all of this stuff. It is a complete rethink of how vehicles are manufactured. And while they're in transition, they may still have some traditional plants. Think about how your internal combustion vehicle was made. And I'm not even talking 50 years ago. Let's talk 5 years ago. And compare that to how EVs are made and how they're moving to make EVs more sustainable. And because of the nature of the engineering and the construction and how they are put together makes it easier to be sustainable, easier to reduce the imprint on the planet than the vehicle you're currently driving. And that's where we're going. Not to mention perpetual updates. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety says partial automation isn't the answer for safer roads. You are listening to the Tech Mobility Show.
Are you tired of juggling multiple apps and platforms for meetings, webinars, and staying connected? Look no further than AONmeetings.com, the all-in-one browser-based platform that does it all. With AON Meetings, you can effortlessly communicate with clients, host virtual meetings and webinars, and stay in touch with family and friends, all in one place and for one price. Here's the best part. You can enjoy a 30-day free trial. It's time to simplify your life and boost your productivity. AONmeetings.com, where innovation meets connection. Get started today and revolutionize the way you communicate.
Social media is the main place to be these days, and we are no exception. I'm Ken Chester, the Tech Mobility Show. If you enjoy my program, then you will also enjoy my weekly Facebook videos. From my latest vehicle reviews to timely commentary of a variety of mobility and technology-related topics, these short features are designed to inform and delight you. Be sure to watch, like, and follow us on Facebook. You can find us by typing the Tech Mobility Show in the search bar. Be sure to subscribe to our Facebook page. Social media is the place to be these days, and we're no exception. I'm Ken Chester of the Tech Mobility Show. If you enjoy my program, then you will also enjoy my weekly Instagram videos. From the latest vehicle reviews to timely commentary on a variety of mobility and technology-related topics, these short features are designed to inform and delight you. Be sure to watch, like, and follow us on Instagram. You can find us by typing the Tech Mobility Show in the search bar. For those of you that listen to podcasts, we have just the one for you. Hi, I'm Ken Chester. Tech Mobility Topics is a podcast where I upload topic-specific videos each week. Shorter than the full show, these bite-sized programs are just the thing, particularly if you're interested in a particular topic covered on the weekly radio show. From Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and many podcast platforms in between, we got you covered. Just enter Tech Mobility Topics in the search bar wherever you listen to podcasts.
2 tons of travel trailer, 1,500 pounds of camper, 4,500 pounds of boat. Towing weight like this can tear the heart out of an ordinary car. But not this baby. This is a Travelall wagon. Travelall, the only wagon built to tow up to 10,000 pounds. Sure, there's 20% more room inside than any other wagon, but that's just for openers. Travelall, built on a truck-style chassis with the beefier engines, drivetrains, and cooling systems you need to haul something big up a mountain. Here's muscle you can't buy, even with beefed-up towing packages on other wagons. Travelall by International. You can get a model to tow up to 10,000 pounds. See it at your International dealers.
I love that commercial. Whether you realize it or not, Navistar's previous name, International Harvester, they actually built at retail a pickup truck, a small SUV called Scout, and they built the mid-size, and we would probably call that full-size today, Travelall, which is a suburban-like vehicle. Back then, that body-on-frame vehicle could haul 5 tons, which honestly, your average half-ton pickup will do today. But back then, it was a big deal. And in this commercial, in this TV commercial, it shows a Travelall hauling all 3 of those items hitched together up a mountain effortlessly. And that was their entire point. And it was pretty dramatic, and it was pretty amazing. But yeah, the Travelall was made for a while, and they sold their fair share of them, and for a good reason. Because if you were looking for something a little more rugged than what the big 3 were offering at the time, then International really was your only choice. According to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, a consumer safety advocacy organization, partial automation systems can, quote, encourage a false sense of security, unquote, in drivers, possibly allowing them to be more easily distracted from keeping their eyes on the road. The IIHS is introducing a new ratings program to encourage automakers to incorporate more robust safeguards into their partial driving automation systems. This is topic A. They are talking primarily about lane centering technology and adaptive cruise control. And according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, they allege these are not safety features, but actually convenience features. For me, to be blunt with you, I would actually say that lane centering and lane change mitigation are more problematic than they're worth. I find them to be more bother. Now, blind, what they call, blind side or I can never get it right, but some technology, which, lets you know if there's something in your blind side on the side of the vehicle, I think that's very useful. And I've been very grateful of it in the past. But right now, as I drive vehicles every week, and I am driving a Subaru Crosstrek with this lane centering technology, and it beeps at me when I wander just a little bit. And I think it's more bother because, I'm driving fine. Adaptive cruise control is another issue. Some automakers have taken adaptive cruise control to what I call the next level, what they call city stop and go. In other words, low speed adaptive cruise control, where if you're in city traffic and you have it set, and I think it's above or below a certain miles per hour, the vehicle actually moves slowly in traffic for you, so you don't have to worry about starting and stopping and what. And Audi comes to mind immediately as one that has something called city traffic. And I think one or two other automakers have that. But what the IIHS is saying predominantly is that this ain't the way to go. They say that partial automation systems usually include at least two key components. Lane centering technology that uses cameras and sensors to keep a vehicle centered within a lane, and adaptive cruise control, which keeps the vehicle at a speed selected by the driver and automatically slows or accelerates to stay within a certain distance from other vehicles. And while you can set that distance, that you usually have three settings to get, what I call really close, which is still not close at all, or really far away, depending on what you want to set. The problem with adaptive cruise control is you can come up on a vehicle moving considerably slower than you, and the vehicle will slow down. But it will also slow down and impede your ability to change lanes at the same time, because it will slow even as you're trying to get into the next lane. So you may actually cause, in my estimation, a safety hazard, because you're moving at a speed slower, attempting to go into the lane. Unless you manually get involved to quickly get the vehicle up the lane, it still takes it longer than it would take you to get it up to speed if changing lanes as a result. The IIHS also says, but according to their recent report, there's little evidence that these two systems are preventing crashes, and that they're not equivalent to safety features like automatic emergency braking, blind spot warning, and lane departure prevention. Lane centering versus lane departure prevention. I feel the same about lane departure prevention as I do about lane centering. I think they're both cumbersome. Automakers, regulators, and consumers should think of these systems as convenient features, not safety features. This is according to Jessica Caccino, Senior Vice President for Research at IIHS and author of the report. As usual, the IIHS researches deeply. Here's what they're basing this on. To investigate the effectiveness of partial automation systems, they analyzed insurance claim and crash data for model years 2017 through 2019 for Nissan Rogues and model years 2013 to 2017 BMW vehicles. Each of these vehicles employed partial automation, Nissan through its Pro Pilot Assist, and BMW through its Driving Assistant Plus. The Highway Loss Data Institute, which is affiliated with the IIHS, examined these vehicles in a 2021 report focused solely on Omni insurance claim data. But with no way to filter the data by type of road on which the crash occurred, the analysis included highway crashes that partial automation is designed to prevent, as well as low-speed crashes on residential roads where partial automation would likely have been turned off. That report had limited the report's conclusions. This year, they expanded upon that research by including police-reported crash data, which allowed the analysis to filter all but the crashes that could have been prevented by partial automation, rear-end crashes, and lane departure crashes. Now, as a result, the study found that BMWs with Driving Assistant Plus were not associated with lower crash rates than BMWs with just the safety feature of lane departure prevention. Nissans with Pro Pilot Assist did have lower crash rates on limited access roads than Nissans with just lane departure prevention and automatic emergency braking systems, but the effect persisted on roads with speed limits under 35 miles per hour when Pro Pilot Assist is unlikely to be engaged, suggesting another variable may be at play. So let's look at this. The IIHS recommends safeguards such as driver monitoring cameras or attention reminders to keep drivers engaged. I hate them both. Toyota has them. I don't like them. You know, they'll tell you, oh, keep your hands on the wheel, and you'll get a ding, ding, ding. Or, car can't see your face, so move your hands. I don't think I am ready for that level of monitoring. I think this is where me and the IIHS are going to agree to disagree. I think if you're going to be a driver, you're going to have to be responsible. Being responsible means that right now there's no such thing as full automation. America's on the verge of losing another generic drug maker, and that's not good news for the price of essential drugs. This is the TechMobility Show. Do you listen to podcasts? Seems that most people do. Hi, I'm Ken Chester, host of the TechMobility Show. If you've missed any of our weekly episodes on the radio, our podcast is a great way to listen. You can find the TechMobility Podcast just about anywhere you can enjoy podcasts. Be sure to follow us. From Apple Podcasts to iHeartRadio and many platforms in between, we are there. Just enter the TechMobility Podcast in the search bar wherever you listen to podcasts. Social media. It's the place to be, we're no exception. Hi, I'm Ken Chester, host of the TechMobility Show. Several times a week, I post to TikTok several of the topics that I cover on my weekly radio show. It's another way to keep up on mobility, technology, news, and information. I've built quite a library of short videos for your viewing pleasure, so be sure to watch, like, and subscribe. That's the TechMobility Show on TikTok. Check it out. The generic drug business in the United States has become a hostile environment for American companies. Prices for critical medicines have dropped so low that they have become difficult for U.S. manufacturers to compete with companies overseas. This is Topic B. Why is a technology and mobility show talking about generic drugs? First of all, you would think that American factories, or at least American businesses, would have learned by now, as a result of the supply chain nightmare that was the pandemic, that having factories overseas for essential or critical items is not the best idea. On the one hand, moving drug production overseas has enabled folks to cut prices, or at least increase profits. Because I can tell you that on average, they say that moving this overseas can save 20 to 30% of the cost of manufacturing the drugs over building it and making it in the United States. And on the one hand, that sounds like an excellent idea, right? If you're a person of a certain age or you have health challenges, being able to afford your medications or having access to those medications would be of tantamount importance. Here's the problem, though. Because so many generic drugs, which represent lower prices, you would think, have moved overseas, that the number of facilities making generic drugs in the United States in its final form have dropped 20% to 2018 to 243. The upshot? Drug shortages have become common. Here's a fact for you. Today, right now in the United States of America, 300 medicines are in short supply. And this is according to the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. Right now, hospitals and patients must scramble to find doses of the drugs they need if there's one hiccup in a pinched supply chain or a quality problem shuts down a manufacturing line. Technology is a double-edged sword. It allows supply chains to become more efficient. It allows companies to optimize production. It allows them to automate a lot. The challenge is you cannot fight the one thing that technology has yet to overcome, and that is distance and timing and availability. And if for some reason something far, far away, a flood, a earthquake, extreme weather, an outbreak, something shuts that factory down, and it's a generic drug you need, there's no American company necessarily that can fill the void, make the drug at a profit, because after all, this is America and capitalism is how we operate. And that means if a company develops a product, invests in the resources, hires the people, buys the machines, builds the factory, and turns it on, that their stockholders, their lenders, and their community is expecting them to make a profit. That profit pays salaries and wages and taxes. That money supports cities, counties, and towns. It trickles through the economy, in the secondary economy, as people go shopping, buy gasoline, buy coffee, buy groceries, have their vehicles repaired, their clothes cleaned, buy flowers. All that happens. When that money and that factory leaves the United States, so does that money. So does those opportunities to support the smaller communities in which many of these factories are. The problem is that lowest price without regard to anything else is not necessarily a noble goal, particularly if it means whether or not you will have the drug available or not. The more money you drive down, the more profit you take out of the system, the less money that manufacturers are able to make to invest in product, to invest in equipment, to invest in people, to build plants in the United States, means that there is the towns that would have gotten those factories poorer for it. Let me give you a quick example. Not same industry, but an example. 20 years ago, I was in Canton, Mississippi, actually in the county, for the opening of Nissan's Canton, Mississippi automobile plant. Now, the plant itself did not sit in the Canton, Mississippi city limits, but it was close to Canton. Here's what happened. Nissan, at the time, was paying the school district $150,000 a year. Canton, because of the proximity to the plant, their downtown got rejuvenated as small businesses were able to move in to benefit from the money flush of the workers who were working in the plant that came into Canton to spend their money. That added to the tax rolls. That improved quality of life in Canton. That improved quality of life even in the rural part of the county in that part of Mississippi. And it improved the entire state. Nissan told me at the time, and by the way, when they were building the plant, while it was under construction, they doubled the size of the plant. They said, when we open, we will employ 2,000 people. When we're at full strength, we will employ 5,000 people. We will employ people from every one of Mississippi's 82 counties, and we will be paying some of the highest wages in the state. The county which Canton is in, and the city of Canton, Mississippi, Jackson to the south along the interstate there, all benefited. Money from Nissan through the plant to the workers that flowed through the communities in which they lived and worked. So the whole state got an advantage. In the case of generic drugs, what does the word generic mean, in case you didn't know what the difference was? Because drugs cost so much to develop and everything in the United States, for the first 17 years of a drug's life, the federal government can award a patent. That means that they are protecting the recipe of that drug, and for that company to make back all the millions, if not billions of dollars they spent to develop the drug, they have the exclusive right to manufacture and sell that drug. And that's how they make their money, and that's how they make their money back. At the end of 17 years, they no longer have that protection, which means anybody can make that product. What is happening is generic drugs, in order to get the low prices, companies are grabbing the recipes and they're going overseas. They're taking the production completely out of the United States. No plant, no workers, no infrastructure built to support it. You may get a lower price, but it's at the mercy of somebody else in another country where you are wholly dependent on supply chain challenges. Any hiccup in that supply chain and that essential, the generic drug that you count on every day may not be available. You remember in the midst of the pandemic, the problem we had with baby formula? And that was one plant in Michigan that supplied it, took offline because of problems in the plant, and suddenly you had shortages. And that was a plant in the United States. And in that case, we had to import the stuff. Think about this way around. Remember, 300 drugs are currently in short supply. This needs to be corrected. The only way it's going to be corrected is people need to take a more holistic view of how this stuff is sourced. Having it sourced closer and having multiple points is a better plan than having a single source. You may get the low price for the short run, but the long run, there are no protections if that plant goes down for any reason, or if there's a problem, or if there's a quality control problem. Then you have real problems. Boeing's problems aren't confined to planes on the ground or in its plants. 2 of its Starliner astronauts are stranded in space, perhaps indefinitely. We are the TechMobility Show. To learn more about the TechMobility Show, start by visiting our website. Hi, I'm Ken Chester, host of the TechMobility Show. The website is a treasure trove of information about me and the show, as well as where to find it on the radio across the country. Keep up with the happenings at the TechMobility Show by visiting techmobility.show. That's techmobility.show. You can also drop us a line at talk@techmobility.show. Did you know that TechMobility has a YouTube channel? Hi, I'm Ken Chester, host of the TechMobility Show. Each week, I upload a few short videos of some of the hot topics that I cover during my weekly radio program. I've designed these videos to be informative and entertaining. It's another way to keep up on current mobility and technology news and information. Be sure to watch, like, and subscribe to my channel. That's the TechMobility Show on YouTube. Check it out.
Are you tired of juggling multiple apps and platforms for meetings, webinars, and staying connected? Look no further than AONmeetings.com, the all-in-one browser-based platform that does it all. With AON Meetings, you can effortlessly communicate with clients, host virtual meetings and webinars, and stay in touch with family and friends, all in one place and for one price. Here's the best part. You can enjoy a 30-day free trial. It's time to simplify your life and boost your productivity. AONmeetings.com, where innovation meets connection. Get started today and revolutionize the way you communicate.
Social media is the place to be these days, and we're no exception. I'm Ken Chester of the TechMobility Show. If you enjoy my program, then you will also enjoy my weekly Instagram videos. From the latest vehicle reviews to timely commentary on a variety of mobility and technology-related topics, these short features are designed to inform and delight you. Be sure to watch, like, and follow us on Instagram. You can find us by typing the TechMobility Show in the search bar. Back in the 1960s, a popular sitcom called Gilligan's Island told a story about a group of tourists that embarked on a small boat for a 3-hour tour. Bad weather ensued during the trip, and they got stranded on a desert island. Viewers tuned in each week to learn what antics the stranded tourists were up to as they tried to adapt. Boeing has 2 astronauts that are stranded in the International Space Station as the troubled aircraft maker and military contractor tries to figure out how to get them back home. It's not the same, and this is Topic C.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship.
Can you imagine? It's one thing if your plane has trouble on the ground, they'll get you another plane. They'll take it out of service. And even in most cases, even with Boeing planes, if it's in air, chances of you surviving it are pretty high. they'll ground them. My dad was a master aircraft technician for a major airline, and I can tell you, regardless of airline manufacturer, they had double and triple protection for each system. So the chances of you crashing, even in a 737 MAX, small. However, the same company that made the 737 MAX, the 787 Dreamliner, and all the problems we have heard about in the last 5 or 6 years pale in comparison to these two astronauts, these two experienced astronauts that rode their Starliner, Boeing Starliner, to the International Space Station. They got to the space station on June 6th, and it was supposed to be an 8-day mission that, as of late July, had stretched to 51 plus days. And this delay is because of the fact that during their approach to the station, 5 of the aircraft's thrusters shut off suddenly. And the spacecraft also sprang a series of small but persistent helium leaks in its propulsion system. Not a good thing if you're trying to get home. Since then, engineers from Boeing and NASA have been running tests to determine what went wrong and to ensure the spacecraft is safe to fly the astronauts home. At a recent briefing, NASA official could not say when that would be. It is one thing to be sent to a different airport because of airline trouble. It's something else for an airplane to be grounded because it has a problem. It's something completely different when you are thousands of miles from home, and this is your only way home, and it's got problems. It's not like you can send a repairman out to fix it. They've got to diagnose it on the ground. Hopefully, it's something that the astronauts have materials or things up there that they can use to fix it, if that's possible. And then there's no test driving it to see if the fixes work. They get to do that in real time. How would you feel? Yeah, exactly. Now, this is what they said that gives me pause. NASA said that the Starliner is probably still healthy enough to fly the crew home, but that decision would be made during an intensive review involving top leadership from NASA and Boeing, and they expect that to happen in the next week or so. Let me read that again. They say it's probably still healthy enough to fly the crew home. Yeah. This is the same one that coming to the station, 5 of its thrusters shut off suddenly, and it sprang a series, not 1 or 2, a series of small but persistent helium leaks in its propulsion system. But it's probably healthy enough, NASA said, for them to come home. But we're not going to do that just yet. Is that doublespeak or is that me? Here's what they said. NASA has said repeatedly that the astronauts are not stranded and that in case of emergency, they can fly home in the Starliner. Okay. If it's good enough to fly home in a case of emergency, why isn't good enough to fly home now, NASA? Are you saying something that we don't know about that Boeing is telling you quietly? Because right now, Boeing doesn't have the greatest track record with their craft. Spacecraft or otherwise, doesn't give me a lot of confidence when you're telling me, well, if it's an emergency, you could probably fly it home. This is kind of like, hey, you've got a wobbly wheel there and 4 of the 5 lug nuts are broken off. But, we think you can get it home on 1 lug nut. We think, in case of emergency, but we want to just check it. Yeah, no. The mission is the first flight of the Starliner with people on board. A test to see how the spacecraft performs before NASA allows a full contingent of 4 astronauts to fly to the space station for stays as long as 6 months. Boeing? This is not giving me confidence at all. None. Nope. No. Meanwhile, while they're up there, extra sets of hands, so space station was glad to have them as they were able to do a lot of different things that the normal crew didn't have time to do. For example, since arriving at the station, they have used an ultrasound machine to scan their veins to collect data on how space affects the human body. One of the astronauts worked on studies that examined the use of microgravity to manufacture higher quality optical fibers that can be made on Earth. And they were working on a study using fluid physics, such as surface tension, to overcome the lack of gravity when nourishing and watering plants grown in space. And then, in addition to science, because, housekeeping is housekeeping, folks, there are chores to do, such as maintenance that's been waiting for a little while, stuff that's been on the books for a little bit. Yeah, so they've been assigned like a pair of hands of a crew of a ship at sea to take inventory of the station's food supplies. They've swapped out a urine processing pump. Ew, but necessary because, space. And the fella, Wiltmore, who's a bit of a handyman and builds tables and sheds for his church, was tasked with servicing a pair of freezers used to hold research samples, as well as refilling the coolant loops in one of the station's water pumps. High praise and high duty when you're stranded. You do what you can, and you make busy. I don't know how I would feel if the spacecraft I'm counting on to get me up there had problems docking. And then you're telling me, well, in case of emergency, you could probably make it home, but we need to find out why it did what it did. So, meaning that there's a fair risk that it may do it on your way out. And if you do it, there's not AAA. You can't call AAA come get you. You are on your serious own. So the question is, will they be able to come home? If they are able to figure out what happened, will the spacecraft be safe enough for them to get home? And what does that look like? Is that a couple more weeks? A couple more months? Longer? Boeing doesn't have the greatest track record in the world, so hopefully they'll be able to figure this out, because if they don't, it's going to be really bad publicity, not to mention potential loss of life of two very capable astronauts. We've come to the end of this visit. Be sure to join me again next time right here. You've been listening to the TechMobility Show.
The TechMobility Show is a copywritten production of TechMobility Productions Incorporated. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or any other use is prohibited without the written consent of TechMobility Productions Incorporated.
For those of you that listen to podcasts, we have just the one for you. Hi, I'm Ken Chester. Tech Mobility Topics is a podcast where I upload topic-specific videos each week. Shorter than the full show, these bite-sized programs are just the thing, particularly if you're interested in a particular topic covered on the weekly radio show. From Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and many podcast platforms in between, we got you covered. Just enter Tech Mobility Topics in the search bar wherever you listen to podcasts. Social media. It's the place to be, and we're no exception. Hi, I'm Ken Chester, host of the Tech Mobility Show. Several times a week, I post to TikTok several of the topics that I cover on my weekly radio show. It's another way to keep up on mobility, technology, news, and information. I've built quite a library of short videos for your viewing pleasure, so be sure to watch, like, and subscribe. That's the Tech Mobility Show on TikTok. Check it out. To learn more about the Tech Mobility Show, start by visiting our website. Hi, I'm Ken Chester, host of the Tech Mobility Show. The website is a treasure trove of information about me and the show, as well as where to find it on the radio across the country. Keep up with the happenings at the Tech Mobility Show by visiting techmobility.show. That's techmobility.show. You can also drop us a line at talk@techmobility.show. Do you listen to podcasts? Seems that most people do. Hi, I'm Ken Chester, host of the Tech Mobility Show. If you missed any of our weekly episodes on the radio, our podcast is a great way to listen. You can find the Tech Mobility Podcast just about anywhere you can enjoy podcasts. Be sure to follow us. From Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many platforms in between, we are there. Just enter the Tech Mobility Podcast in the search bar wherever you listen to podcasts.